we can assure you that we will continue to lean on you, and you can rest assured that as a country and as a people of South Africa, we will continue to support the people of Russia. It may be Russia now, it was Soviet Union yesterday, but it is the people of Russia we are supporting, we are working with, and we know you will continue to hold our hands. And thank you. Thank you, Program Director. Thank you, Moderator. Allow me to recognize the presence of Ms. Matvinko, the Chairwoman of the Russian Federation Council, Honorable Volodin, the Speaker and Chair of the Duma, and to express a word of appreciation for us to participate in this forum at this session. Fellow presiding officers, members of the Diplomatic Corps, members of Parliament, honorable members, secretaries to Parliament who are here with us this afternoon, good afternoon. Thank you once again for your invitation in order for us to join the rest of the delegations to this important conference and help us to tease out the underlying perspectives of our gathering over the past 2 days. For us, as South African Parliament, as clearly articulated by the Honorable Masondo, a multipolar world simply means that power is not dominated by one country, but distributed amongst multiple countries. And therefore, the proponents of this view argue that the world has to evolve into a multipolar order where several power centers balance one another. Now, I thank the opportunity for us to listen to President Putin. And President Putin has this to say in his prediction that African countries will become leaders in the multipolar world, and furthermore that we will become a big majority for the betterment of the lives of our people through building on sound economic development initiatives. I think that it is something which we should take very seriously and commit ourselves to this creation of a multipolar world. Recently, we emerged from the Inter-Parliamentary Union session that was held in Bahrain, where most of my colleagues, some who are here, were in attendance. What became evident during the general debate, particularly on the emergency items, that there are countries that continue to be an imbalance of power of the geopolitical groups, where the so-called major powers have become more influential in international politics. This continues to cripple our respective states' developmental agenda, mutual interests, and cooperation. The extent and nature of multipolarity remain uncertain, and what is certain is that the old order, and therefore the unipolar world, will not fall without its rulers taking extreme measures to cling to power, to dominate, and continue to divide us. Currently, many countries here are facing aggressive sanctions and many other means of control. I may cite Zimbabwe, which is here with us. I may cite the Russian Federation itself. This cannot be the solution as ordinary citizens, women and children are the most vulnerable when sanctions kick in any country. This is one unspeakable form of human rights violation. Over long decades of colonialism, Africa as the continent continues to suffer the brunt of exploitation and drainage of our resources. Therefore, Africa needs a fair and balanced partner to support our inspirations as a continent, which are enshrined in our 2063 document, as was articulated by Honorable Masondo. In the light of everything which has happened in relation to the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, it is important for the African parliaments to individually and collectively scrutinize government's actions in implementing the trade agreement. The World Bank, as was clearly said, and the African Trade Agreement Secretariat indicate that the agreement is fully implemented, if fully implemented, would raise concerns in Africa by 9% by 2035 and lift 50 million people out of extreme poverty. It is also important to note that the successful implementation of the agreement will be highly dependent on securing lasting solutions to conflict. African parliaments must therefore strengthen efforts to find solutions to the conflicts and other pressing issues, including climate change and high levels of debt. I'm happy, Honorable Volodya, that you were able to invite countries, the transitional governments of Burkina Faso, Mali, so that they too can share their perspectives around the challenges they are confronted with in their countries. Honorable Putin, the president, quotes Madiba, the former president and the late president of the Republic of South Africa, and he had this to say: "Indeed, nothing must get on our way to freedom." It is so opportune that now Russia is working with us. You have worked with us in the past when we were fighting against colonialism. You are now beginning to work with us so that we can, beyond political freedoms, we can acquire economic development and prosperity in our country. Political freedom can never be on its own. In order for us to really feel the spin-offs of political freedom, there has to be economic development. There has to be prosperity in our countries. And this is just what you have begun to do with the countries in our continent. The rich history between the two nations, as in my country now, continue to define several bilateral agreements and memoranda of understanding. We have signed some of them, and these include in tourism, mining, agriculture, medicine, and education. Furthermore, several high-level visits, as well as parliamentary engagements on the margins of international and multilateral fora, have taken place over the years. Now, President Putin then also makes mention of the fact that a huge margin for investment, that is approximately 45% to Europe versus 3% to Africa, requires a complete world order overhaul. And therefore, we welcome as South Africa the opportunity to receive training, particularly around technology advancement and in many areas of growth and development. Now, this will not be the beginning of training of our people. You did this training when South Africa was at its worst, when it was not fashionable for major countries and major powers to associate with our people. And now you have come out openly and you are saying we continue to walk this road, this path together with the African continent. And we want to thank you for that. Having mentioned all the above initiatives that have been talked to by many of us, in the spectre of the growing trends in global politics and what we term in this conference as the multipolar world, there is an absolute need to continue to build on a fair, equal, and just society with fair, equitable distribution of wealth and to build on peaceful coexistence. As the African Parliament, we look forward to more meaningful deliberations and partnerships, and we can assure you that we will continue to lean on you, and you can rest assured that as a country and as a people of South Africa, we will continue to support the people of Russia. It may be Russia now, it was Soviet Union yesterday, but it is the people of Russia we are supporting, we are working with, and we know you will continue to hold our hands. And as a last plea to you, honorable members from the African continent, as mentioned earlier on by both Honorable Mudenda from Zimbabwe and the Honorable Chairperson of the NCOP from Namibia, I would want us to make a very strong plea to you as member of the P5 to continue to support the call by the African continent to have its representation in the United Nations Security Council. We actually are calling on you to support us in our call for the reforms of the United Nations. Because if that does not happen, we will continue to have the kinds of conflicts which we are seeing in our continent. And of course, what happens when there's a conflict, then we are penalized. And once you are penalized, then you are expected, sanctions are thrown on you, and you run short of partners. There are very few people who are able to stand with us when there are challenges. Very few countries. Most of the countries would rather walk away from you when you encounter problems. We thank you once more for giving us the support. We thank the people of Mali and the people of Burkina Faso for being part of this contingent of members to visit Russia, so that we can all exchange views, share experiences, and see how best the people of your country can be supported through you. Thank you very much, honorable members.
Of a multipolar world is a term that describes the world's order where power is distributed among multiple countries. Some see it as transition from a unipolar or bipolar world where one or two countries dominated international relations. On the other hand, others view it as a challenge to the international relations system and as a source of conflict and instability. In fact, what the founders and champions of the term intends to achieve and see is a world that will have a greater share of a power than the one we have today. It is an open secret that the current world order has caused more harm to the world peace, security, and stability of the rivals and emerging nations. The good news is that a fundamentally different picture of the world is taking shape day by day. Movements of reclaiming the rightful position of sharing political and economical power is within reach. However, it is also important to note that the end of one era and the start of the next is never a straightforward process. It is usually marked by a series of intense back and forth conflicts. Director of Proceedings, the fact that Africa, a major geographic region, remains underrepresented and unrepresented in the permanent categories of the United Nations Security Council is unjustifiable and a serious testimony of the historic imbalances. Several member states have made enough calls and supported the expansions of both the permanent and non-permanent member category of the Security Council. The drums calling for the need to reshape the United Nations Security Council that is never inclusive and reflective of the membership state of the world, in particular the exclusion of Africa, are loud enough to be ignored any longer. To remain the relevant of the United Nations, the Security Council needs to be modernized to reflect the equality and equity in the distributions of seats to the geopolitical regions of this world. The Council's legitimacy must be strengthened and measures must be taken to increase the Council's capacity to adequately carry out its duty in maintaining international peace and security. On this occasion, I reiterate the call in support of Africa's common position for the United Nations to collect the persistent historical imbalances in the Security Council. Director of Ceremonies, allow me to turn and talk to ourselves as Africa under the umbrella of African Union, AU, which is charged with the role to empower African countries and ensure social, economic, and political development across the continent. Added on, to shape the agenda and decisions in Africa and on the global affairs. The African Union has shown its capacity to provide leadership and acting as advisors to governments and intergovernmental agencies. Hence, I laud the African Union for championing the forward-thinking development framework, such as Agenda 2063 and the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. However, the missing link is that Africa, under the African Union, AU, ought to speak in one common voice to demand a seat, or rather seats, on the power table in the envisaged multipolar world. Director for Proceedings, as I conclude, allow me to quote Martin Luther King, Jr., who once said, and I quote, "Freedom is never given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed," end of quote. In summary, I am saying that we cannot continue still allowing unipolar and bipolar driving global developments by remaining the global center of gravity, while their actions or the actions that they take are felt throughout the world. We cannot. Thank you so much for listening to me.
To meet our ever-present and evolving challenges. Our parliaments have a greater role to play in fostering a multipolar world. They can do so by maintaining constant oversight over the actions of our governments, including on how they approach the resolution of the challenges that we face. In this way, we could be able to deal with the challenges which include energy and food security, inequality, climate change, and the destruction caused by conflicts. Program Director, many would agree that the true test of democracy is the extent to which our parliaments can ensure the accountability of those who govern, acting on behalf of and in the interest of those who are governed. One of the means of encouraging multipolarism is through the promotion of multilateral engagement in a sustained effort to build a better world. This requires that we take the necessary steps to tamper with the arrangements where few nations wield disproportionate decision-making power in our global governance systems and structures. Of great importance in this regard is the need to strengthen the multilateral trading system to create a conducive environment for fair trade that also provides opportunities for developing economies. It is common cause that over centuries of colonialism, Western countries exploited Africa and drained its wealth without investing in any development. Therefore, Africa needs a fair and balanced partner to support its aspirations. Africa's aspirations are enshrined in the Africa Union Agenda 2063, which is a strategic long-term planning instrument for the development of Africa. To achieve this, Agenda 2063, out of a number of goals which include, amongst others, a high standard of living, quality of life and well-being for all citizens, including well-educated citizens and skill evolutions, including transformed economies, including world-class infrastructure, and including preservation of peace, security, and stability. The Africa Continent Free Trade Agreement is one of the flagship projects of Agenda 2063. It seeks to significantly boost intra-African trade. The trade agreement has the potential to make the African continent a formidable economic power and player in a multipolar world. To date, 47 member states have ratified the agreement, out of which 46, including South Africa, have deposited their instruments of ratification to the African Union Commission, making them state parties with rights and obligations under the agreement. However, we are aware that far more still needs to be done. In this light, it is important for African parliaments to individually and collectively scrutinize government's actions in implementing the trade agreement. It is worth noting that the World Bank and the African Trade Agreement Secretariat indicate that the agreement, if fully implemented, would raise incomes in Africa by 9% by 2035 and lift 50 million people out of extreme poverty. As we indicated during yesterday's roundtable discussion on neo-colonialism of the West, we made the point that the promotion of economic self-reliance of African and developing countries is one of the key strategies to prevent the repeat of the history of colonialism. In this regard, it is important and far much more sustainable for African and developing countries to reduce their dependence on foreign aid and investment. In conclusion, Program Director, on behalf of the Parliament of South Africa, I know that the Speaker from South Africa, from the National Assembly is still going to speak. We are grateful for the opportunity to participate in this important conference on creating a multipolar world using the lens of Russia-Africa relations in areas pertaining to the economy, science, and security. The creation of a multipolar world should be premised on the fact that our strength lies in our diversity. Therefore, the promotion of a multilateral engagement and global solidarity in tackling the enormous challenges we face and the constant vigilance of our parliaments can help to foster a multipolar world. Africa is doing her part to become a trusted partner in global affairs by addressing the challenges whose root causes are the centuries of oppression and exploitation by colonial powers. Once again, we truly appreciate this opportunity to address the final plenary session of the International Parliamentary Conference held under the theme Russia-Africa in a Multipolar World. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And with the final intervention, would like Madam Nosiviwe Noluthando Mapisanka-Kula to have the floor and be the final concluding speaker of the conference.